Hello, I'm Axel Wilkinson with another PhotoKey 5 tutorial. Today we are going to look at what happens when the subject of your green screen photo is wearing green clothing. The first rule of green screen photography, at least according to me, is to never use your background color on the subject. This applies equally no matter if your backdrop is green, blue, or some other color. Being able to select and remove the background and leave the subject, which is the whole concept behind keying, hinges on having a separation in color between the foreground and the background. If the same color is present in both places, then the keying process becomes much more difficult. But if your subject shows up wearing a bright green shirt and you shoot them in front of a green screen, this is what happens when you try to key it. Now obviously, you can see a lot of white through that shirt. If I turn the white background off for a second, you can see how transparent that shirt has really become because it's the same color as the green screen. So if your subject arrives at a green screen shoot wearing a bright green shirt like this, then you have only a few options. Your best option is to just use a blue screen instead. If your subject is wearing green, if we just shoot them in front of a blue screen instead, then we can key out the blue without affecting the green shirt. If you do a lot of green screen shooting and you don't currently have a blue screen, I highly recommend that you look into getting one just for situations such as this. But a second option would be to have the subject change their shirt to one that is a more appropriate color. Now here we have another situation where there's just a small amount of green present on our foreground. This awesome Ben 10 wrist communicator thing is bright green, so obviously it's being keyed out. So if you have a situation where only a small area of clothing is green, then you could use masks to stop that area from being removed. We can very quickly add a mask, draw it around there, set it to retain alpha, and we're good to go. So that can be very quick for small areas inside of your subject that are green. A green tie or green numbers on a sports uniform, as other examples, you could use masks in those cases to very quickly retain those green areas of the foreground. But what if the green clothing borders directly onto the green screen? Here we have the exact same wrist device, but because the edges of it are directly against the green screen, it's going to be much harder to mask that out. If we just draw a rectangular mask again like we did the first time, it's not going to work because we're now retaining a bunch of this green screen as well. And so you would have to very carefully draw the mask right along the edge of that device in order to retain it using masks. And so in this case, masks are a much less appealing solution to the problem. If we compare these two images, which both have the exact same green item in them, notice that the difference between the first one, where the mask worked well, and the second one, where the mask didn't work so well, the only difference is the pose of the subject. And so pay attention to the posing. If you do have a green item that has to be present in front of a green screen, you can adjust the pose in some cases in such a way that it will make processing the images later on much easier for you. Now, with some shades of green, you might be able to adjust the key with enough precision to remove the green screen but retain the clothing. Here, this is kind of a dark olive green shirt, and there's not a lot of green there. It's kind of pushing toward brown. So in that case, the shirt isn't really affected by our key. See, we have a little bit of dirty area down here in the bottom, but we can adjust the key to remove that very quickly without still affecting our shirt. Now, in this case, we have two different shades of green going on in our subject, kind of a pale green shirt and then this darker green tie. And so when we turn that key back on, we can still adjust the key to retain those areas of the foreground. We've got a little bit of artifacting down there that we could clean up. There we go. Now we're getting a little bit of a rough edge on that foreground. Bring that down, and that has cleaned it up pretty well. But we do need to keep in mind that when we're adjusting things this far to retain green areas in our foreground, it can negatively impact the edge detail of our key. In fact, let me zoom in. You can see how chunky that edge is starting to get here on the hair and down on the shoulder there. If I reset the chroma key settings to their default, you can see some of the softness that was originally present in the edges of the hair there gets lost as we adjust our key settings to compensate for the green in the foreground. Of course, We do understand that there will be cases where green clothing shot in front of a green screen cannot be avoided. So, PhotoKey 5 has a variety of tools, including masks and the various keying filters, to help you to deal with those situations. But we also want to make sure that you are educated as to the other options for avoiding these problems to ensure that your experience with PhotoKey is as smooth as possible. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you benefited from this, and I hope you'll join me again next time.